Once you have finished administering the letter sounds, decoding, and spelling portions of the informal coding assessment, you are ready to begin calculating your results and graphing the data. As you prepare for this, you will need all of your assessment data, a pen or pencil, calculator, ruler, and 2 different colored marking pens or highlighters. First, get your recording sheet for letter sounds. On the recording sheet, you will count the number correct in each section. Divide the number correct by the total number found in parentheses at the end of each section. When you are done calculating the percentages for each section, set the letter sounds sheet aside. Next, we will calculate the scores for the decoding portion. You will need the teacher sheet for recording word lists. Each section has 25 words. Again, you will count the number correct and write it in the space provided at the end of each section. Divide the number correct by the total, in this case 25, to get your percentage for each section. When you are done, set the decoding paperwork aside. Finally, you will get the scores for the spelling portion. You will need both the student spelling sheets as well as the spelling list page which you use to dictate the words to your student, in order to check that their responses are correct. I find these calculations the easiest since they are based on 10 words per section. If the student got 6 words correct, they have a 60%, 7 correct, a 70%, and so on. When you have finished with all of your calculations, get ready to transfer your data to the informal coding skills assessment results pages. There are 2 of these sheets, one that contains the 3 benchmark columns for recording your letter sounds assessment data, and one that contains 3 benchmark columns for recording both your reading and spelling assessment data. As you begin to place your data on the results pages, make sure you are working with the correct pages to alleviate the frustration of transferring all of your information onto the wrong sheet. You could, of course, transfer the information as you are calculating your percentages, but I find it easier to do it all at once. You may use whatever method you find easiest. Continue placing your calculated percentages on the appropriate lines for each portion, paying close attention to the heading names as you go to prevent transcribing errors. Once you have finished transferring all the data from each portion of the informal coding assessment, you are ready to create your graph. It is important to note that you will only be graphing the student's results for reading and spelling. The letter sounds information is divided into different categories and so does not line up on the graph correctly. Start with reading and place a dot at each appropriate point on the graph for each section heading, closed syllables, consonant digraphs, and so on. Once you have all your dots in order, use your ruler to connect them. Take one of your colored markers and trace over your line. Also, don't forget to create a legend at the bottom of the page so others can see which line represents reading and which represents spelling. On the same graph, repeat the above steps for the spelling scores. As a side note, I would encourage you to connect the dots with the pencil or pen rather than the colored marker by itself. I have done this in the past thinking I could get away with skipping a step, only to find out that the colored line was not visible in a copy. It is much easier to trace over the lines again with the marker if you can see your original line. Finally, make sure your student's name and the date of the assessment are at the top of the graph. Double check to make sure you have put the correct assessment dates at the top of each benchmark column on your results pages. You are now done with the informal coding assessment.